Welcome to Waiting on the Trade, a comics book club for people who can't keep up with monthly comics. I'm Matt Ledger.
I'm Patrick Fitzgerald Fleck.
And I'm Jonathan Gurney.
This month, we're talking about the first volume of Skull-Face Bookseller Honda-San, a frantic manga about a frantic person who sells manga. In case you need a refresher, Skull-Face Bookseller is a look at the inner workings of a Japanese bookstore through the eyes of an excitable employee who portrays herself as a skeleton. In this volume, Honda-san deals with foreign customers, demanding publishers, requests for manga recommendations, and every employee's favorite, corporate mandated training.
The horror.
It's awful, actually. Learn how to smile.
I thought that was a highlight of the book. Was seeing Japanese corporate mandated training. Yeah.
So it's actually weird. Of the two manga I've read this week, both of them have dealt with corporate mandated smile training. I also read the first volume of Smoking Behind the Supermarket with You this weekend that I got from the library, which is cute and fun, and I would recommend. It has some issues, but overall it's cute and fun. But that's not the book we're here to talk about. We are here to talk
recommendations are at the end, Matthew. What are you doing?
It's not a linked recommendations. They're very different.
My God.
Wrap it up, guys. We're already at recommendations.
Yeah, podcast done. Thanks for coming on, Jado. Glad you took time out.
My pleasure, always.
We talked about fucking bears for so long. It's not fair.
We talked about Star Wars comics off mic, and now we're done. No, Skull-Face Bookseller. I enjoyed it. I did not pick it. Jono actually did not pick it. Pat, you picked Skull-Face Bookseller.
Yes, I suggested this one, but it's amazing, and I have no qualms with that. Jono, do you agree?
So defensive.
I mean, like as always, I think I have recommended a book once for the show, and I think you guys have not trusted me to make a recommendation since then.
No, I think it's honestly not that we don't trust you; it's that you don't trust you. Because every time I'm like, Jado, if there's anything you want to read, you're like, no, I did it that one time, and I don't want to do it again. I failed the podcast.
I mean, to be fair, that recommendation was awful. And in your defense, you actually gave me three choices for this episode, and the first one was Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 1, but this is not Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 1, the Volume 1 that I had. This is apparently a new Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 1 that was published in 2024.
Spider-Man Volume 1, parentheses, 2024.
Yes, and I'm a huge Spider-Man fan.
Comic statement to make.
And I am a huge Spider-Man fan, and even though I haven't really been keeping up with the comics, and I always keen to talk Spider-Man, but that is actually a problem in a single hour podcast because I think there's just too much to be said in an hour. I would derail the conversation several times just to talk Spider-Man villains, and how they are like absolutely the best tier of comic book villain, bar none. Potentially Batman has a similar rogues gallery, and I think that there's a lot to be said with how they approach villains, but both of them, as in there is a real desire to help rather than harm their villains, and as you can see, I'm already like getting into that headspace, and I don't want to.
You're making me feel so bad that we're not talking about Ultimate Spider-Man parentheses 2024 right now. You're like making me write this in pen. Like next time Jono comes on the podcast, Ultimate Spider-Man 2024, because like, oh man, we could do this for 2 hours.
Like that is a conservative estimate, 2 hours. Like, I feel bad because I think the conversation would drag well into midnight for you guys, and then poor Pat would have to edit 16 hours down into 2, and I think that would be very hard for him to do. So Skull-Face Bookseller Honda-San was the middle recommendation from you guys, and I sort of said, yeah, look, if there's no other preference, I wouldn't mind doing that one as well, as it looked the most interesting sort of thing of something that we haven't done before, the three of us discussing comics, and I don't tend to read a lot of manga, not out of any dislike for the format, but just more out of, I think, as we will discuss, like a lack of knowing where to start.
Mm-hmm.
That is a good topic for us to discuss, given this book, for sure. I liked that you picked that one of the 3 choices we had given you actually for a few reasons. One was, I think it's the one Pat was most keen to read. Pat had brought it up as a potential choice for him and me and Kat to discuss. But
Okay.
Kat felt it was a little bit too frantic for her, and she got lost in some of the terms, I think, and like it just kind of wasn't what she wanted to talk
Choices were
about.
made, and
So we talked about a thing that Pat didn't want to talk about instead.
Yeah,
I,
and like
I
it's
can't
like
unread
that episode.
things. Yeah.
Yeah, that episode was like poor Pat. I really felt for Pat that entire
Thank you,
episode,
Jonathan. Thank you.
and very salient points made on both sides of the argument. But I think ultimately I am Team Pat
I
for
didn't expect that to be
Thank
the
you.
most controversial episode of the podcast, the My Boyfriend is a Bear
uh,
episode, but I guess it is now, so that's a thing that's happened to me.
I think
Um,
I think the invocation of Animorphs was obviously anytime anybody mentions Animorphs, I'm 100% on board. But I will say the Animorphs actually struggled a lot with sentience, and they made the very difficult choice that they would not acquire morphs if they felt that the animal was sentient without permission. And so to say that animals have sentience is quite a sticking point when it comes to the animorphs, particularly because bears in particular were decided to not have sentience, which is why it was the combat morph of choice for Rachel. Although hers
that's
was a grizzly bear, it's still again
wild to
like
me
this
that
is
they
this is a
decided
topic I can
grizzly bears
talk
don't have
for
sentience.
hours.
Again, though, I was
But
just
I
gonna say
think
we're off on another
sentience
3-hour
is
podcast here.
Yes, yeah, and I did think salient points were made by both sides of the argument, but I do ultimately, as I said, fall on Team Pat.
Well, it's good because Pat was feeling like he was left out in the cold on
It
that
was
one.
2v1 the whole time.
It
It was
was
awful.
I
very
tried
much
to
two v
middle
one.
ground it a little bit, though I was
You
on Cat's side. I was on Cat's
whatever.
side, I will admit.
You dipped a toe and then you immediately retracted it.
Anyways, the other reason that I liked that we picked Skull-Face Bookseller is that we haven't done a manga in a little bit, I don't believe. So I like to get back in and have read and discussed a manga every once in a while because, like, I feel like comics website, like American-based, I guess, for lack of a better term, comics websites, like, don't discuss manga as much as they probably should, and, like, I'm also guilty of that, like, on the blog and in the podcast, so, like, it's nice to get one in the rotation every once in a while, so I'm kinda glad you picked that because it worked out that we gave Cat a nice or God, I said cat. It worked out that we gave Pat a nice little, like, olive branch, a nice little here, come back to the podcast, Pat, be excited about it. We're gonna talk about this manga you really liked.
Oh,
I thought it was a really great recommendation, and I think it was my first time reading it, and I'd never heard of it before. So that was also like it was a nice discovery, I guess, or a nice in that way. And I think to your point, Matt, one thing that this book does is show us a side of comics that we perhaps had no idea existed, and that is the bustle of a manga bookstore in Tokyo, and I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, I do also love, like, industry behind the scenes stuff for comics, as evidenced by the fact that I've been running this comics blog for, like, 7 years, and every once in a while I try to get interviews with, like, retailers or librarians and, like, other people, so seeing some of that stuff, especially for a different country where, like, comic reading habits are not the same at all,
Mhm.
the bit in there where the Brazilian fan asks why manga are in black and white, and, like, the answer and I think this is honestly the real answer is just, like, it's cheaper
lost.
and easier to produce, and, like, that's
Yeah. Yep.
how that industry runs there, like,
I would think the
again, like,
turnaround
cool
too
stuff.
would be a factor, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, especially for, like, if you're
Mhm.
in Jump, like, if you're producing stuff weekly, like and those are ostensibly made by 1 to 2 people, like a writer
It's
and artist,
crazy, yeah.
but they all have assistants. Like, if you look at the actual, like, credits and, like,
Yeah, yeah,
whatever
yeah.
for those, like, they've all got, like, entire art teams to crank out these black and white weekly or monthly chapters. Because, like, of course you would. How would you do it otherwise?
And to me, like the thing that fascinates me when we were in Japan is to think about the logistical nightmare that it must be to stock all of these little stores, like the convenience stores and everything, given how busy and bustling Tokyo was when we were there. Like, just to think about how the minutia of just getting comics to where they need to be out on time so that they're ready to go on sale for the crowds of people that want to buy them that day. It the mind boggles, and that's just for one store. And for that to be happening weekly,
also, like, it's just the manga industry. And like, I know the bookstore here does like manga, some novels, some light novels, like some art books, but like mostly it seems like it's a manga store, right? Like, so like you're basically just dealing with comics, and like I know comics are again like much more like conventionally popular, such that like more people are going to be in these stores than are in like a standard American direct market comic book store. So like there's that. But yeah, just the number of titles that you would have to keep up with and make sure you've got stocked, and like people come into the store and do you have this? No, you don't, because like you've chosen to not order that because you have to choose to order this other thing that you thought was going to be popular. Like, yeah, wild.
Yeah. So Pat, what led you to want us to recommend this one?
I always love that Jono directs the podcast. It's great.
Oh, Jono, that's the question I was literally going to ask next. Like, there's certain guests where I'm like, I'm not going to have to work at all, and it's great. Jono, you are one of those guests.
That's an excellent question, Jono. I'm glad you asked. I actually watched the anime adaptation of this first, because that's usually where I'm introduced to most of my Japanese media, is through anime. And it's very wholesome. It does a really good job of adapting this. And I wanted to read the manga to see if there were... It has like a little bit more details and like little like minor stories and stuff that weren't in the anime. And it just flushes it out, ironically. Yeah,
because I think that is a good segue into the central conceit, I guess, of the story is not that the character is a bookseller, but that they are a skeleton. And I think that skull face is misleading, because they do not just have a skull face; they are a full skeleton wearing. They are a full skeleton wearing clothes, like no flesh to be seen whatsoever.
So it's actually a really cool way to do anonymity, right? Because like that's the hook there, is like you're remaining anonymous. You're not like putting your bookstore on blast. You're not putting like all your bookstore.
Right. It's not like a fantasy world where these creatures are running a bookstore for a normal world. No, these are actual people. It's just this woman is taking real life stories and writing them into her manga, and is trying to keep her coworkers' names and faces out of it.
And like
it's very respectful in that way. Yeah.
Like rather than just do that with like normal people, obscure detail, like facial features and details and like different names. It's like, oh, this one is store
Gas
manager
Mask.
Plague Mask. Yeah. Which Plague Mask is my favorite. I think
Plague Mask is great. I like Fox Mask as well. She's really good.
Yeah. I think I picked my favorite quote was from Plague Mask. And apparently in the anime, am I correct? Honda-San actually has a male voice actor further adding.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I was surprised, is that Honda is a woman. I had no idea. It is more. Yeah.
That leads us into how Matt read this comic book, actually.
Oh, okay.
So initially when I read it, it was the month that Kat was going to be on the podcast, because it was potentially one of our options for that month. So I got it from the library. I read it legally. I enjoyed it, and I put it back in the library. And so I tried to reserve it again before this recording, and it's in some like far away library in our system, so it takes a while to get here. So it's not here yet. And I wanted to refresh myself before we recorded. So I read Scanlations illegally online. So it's really interesting, the difference between like, and I can't track them all obviously because I don't have the official translation in front of me, but like I definitely know there are differences between like the official translation published by whoever the English publisher is. I forget off the top of my head at the moment, even though I looked it up yesterday. But like there are definitely differences between the fan translations, which like those are like a weird act of love to put this book online illegally. So I don't even know how I feel about that, because it's like yes, it's scanned. Yes, like the people who made the book are not making any money, but at the same time, it's also a sign that fans love the content enough that they're like taking the time to translate it, redraw it in some places. Like there are credits to like who did the translation, who did the proofreading, who did some of the redrawing to make like the balloons work in English in these like
Sure.
unofficial scanlations. So like
That's
that was all
cute.
kind of interesting. But yeah, some of the stuff like there's some swear words that I'm pretty sure are not in the official one. There's some slang
Oh,
that I think is translated differently. Like I think when they're doing the, and I'm probably saying the word wrong, we'll get into the glossary later, but like yayo girls from overseas,
Yahweh.
like
Yeah.
Yahweh,
Yahweh.
like
Yeah.
the like Middle Eastern contingent is called the Muslim forces in the unofficial translation online. I don't think that's what it is in the official one. Um,
They're just called Muslims, but yeah.
oh, is it?
Mm.
Okay, so
Yeah.
closer than I remembered then. But like, so seeing those differences was interesting. And I had somewhere else I was going with that. I don't
Were they
remember it
not?
now because I
Is
dived into the
Honda
rabbit
not a
hole.
woman in the
That was
scanlation?
it. Yes,
Or
the pronouns. So it's different in different chapters based on who translated it.
oh,
Oh,
interesting.
interesting.
So in like chapter 1 or 2, like female pronouns are used, and then in chapter like 3 or 4, male pronouns are used.
Huh.
Um, and there's even a comment on one of the pages I was looking at that's now they're a guy, they were a woman in the previous chapter. What gives? And it's like it's an unofficial translation, bro. What do you want?
Yeah, I'm sure they watch the anime. The people would.
No, it's when unofficial translations go woke, it's just
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
classic problem.
caught up in pronouns. That's rough.
Get in there. Yeah, but that was actually like it was really interesting because I did notice some differences between the two for sure. I think there was the like the baby me or whatever slang in that
Yeah,
one
the
where
babooey. Yeah.
yeah, like that is actually just translated as like baby me, and I think it's translated that way to show that they're not using it correctly. Because like
Oh,
in the
sure.
manga, it notes that they're not using it correctly.
Yeah.
So like yeah, it was interesting. I still have the official volume on hold, and it should be coming from the library, and I kind of want to go back and compare it.
Compare.
Yeah,
Sure.
compare it side by side. Yeah.
If I find anything interesting, maybe I'll slap it in the show notes. But like, I have not done as much digging into the world of like fan scanlations for manga because I tend to read stuff legally when I can. So like
Sure.
it's interesting to dip my toes in the water of that because like it's a huge community that exists out there. Like I knew about it beforehand, but like
Maybe the
actually
same thing with Sailor V,
interesting.
right? Because we couldn't actually find.
Yeah, Sailor V, we couldn't find a copy actually too. Yeah.
hmm hmm
I think that one might have been I don't know if that was an official translation that we just found or not,
I
but
don't
like
remember.
this one's much rougher than that was
Hmm,
on the site I
interesting.
found it at least. So
So
yeah.
I had the digital copy. I bought it on Kindle. So that is the Yen Press official translation, I believe.
Yeah.
Um, uh, somewhat embarrassingly, and I will take feedback on this, but uh, a lot of my search terms over the last few weeks have been reverse manga order Kindle reader because I did find reading right to left is a bit of a learned skill, and one that I perhaps have not spent a lot of time developing, and it was not possible to do so. And also because typically when you read a comic book, it might have just been on Comixology, but I did understand that Kindle had or Amazon had purchased them. But you can do that sort of panel by panel read,
The zoomed in.
where
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It does not work with this one. Or it does zoom in, but it does not. It just kind of goes as though it was a traditional 4-panel format rather than
Sure.
to the
Oh, interesting.
individual. Yeah, and so that again, that doesn't help with the reading or the comprehension, which is to say, I mean, it's still very readable, still very enjoyable, but definitely, I think if Amazon is listening, like just step up your game when it comes to manga, because
Yeah, I'm
I
trying to think
think
if I've
that's a
done
big.
guided view with a manga before. Like, I think the only actual manga I've done, no, because I did Demon Slayer. I don't think I do guided view when I read manga though, because of the way the pages are proportioned, it works out such that
Yep.
like on my tablet you don't really need guided view. So I don't know if I've ever even tried it. I would not be surprised that it breaks down because guided view can be rough on
Yeah.
even like American comics at times.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe that does contribute somewhat to the frenetic. Like the art is gorgeous, but reading it on a tablet does you can get a little bit lost. I
Sure.
think.
I think that is
fair.
just the feel of the book. And if I have a like quote unquote complaint about the book, which I don't think I do, I think it's just the style and I don't quite mesh. Like my quote unquote complaint about the book would be that it's like it's so frantic all the time. And I was trying to dig into like
Interesting.
and I was trying to dig into why I feel that way about it, because like just to say that it does not feel specific enough to me. So like I was looking at pages yesterday and like, why do I have this feeling that it's just like shouting at me the whole time?
Really? I didn't get that at all. But
This is partially why we did not read it when Cat's month was up to pick a book, because she had that feeling like 2 to 3 times what I did, and I had it also at the same time, but, like, even rereading it, over the course of this week, I was like, "Yeah, I still feel like I'm still getting this feeling." Um, and I think it's for a couple reasons. It's 'cause every page is kind of packed with either words or effects, and there's like no panel where you're just like breathing for a second. It's either there's a lot of words going on because it's Honda-san's like inner thoughts and they are a frantic person. Like that is I feel like that is true.
Comes across
they're
definitely. Yes.
anxious. Yes.
They are an excitable person, which I did appreciate that. Like I liked that about them. That character trait was endearing to me. But I think
Mhm.
when you couple it with the pacing of the pages themselves, where like you'll have 3 panels and like they're all just close-ups on people like making like facial expressions, and like there's also sound effects and there's also like speed lines. I'm thinking specifically of the page where I think it's the first chapter that like foreign father comes in and he's looking for that like weird fanfic hentai manga that
Yep.
no one will
Yep.
possibly have. There's like a 3 panel page where it's him, and then it's him showing that picture on his phone, and then it's Honda-san's like skeleton face and close up below that.
Yeah.
And there's no room to breathe on that page anywhere. Like
Well, it's
it's all
the funny
all
reveal. Why would you want to breathe on that? The
so
joke
like
is that he's looking for hentai
yes,
For
but
his
like
for his daughter, no less.
for his
Yeah.
daughter. Yeah.
and so like as the payoff for a joke page, yes, maybe that makes sense, but like I feel like every page is like that, where it's just like everything is super condensed and like overlapping on each other, and there's nowhere on the page for your like there's no like open negative space on the page for your eye to breathe in, if that makes sense. That's not a phrase that makes sense, but like every single page is just kind of like this mash of either thoughts or like
Mm.
people yelling.
And to
Um,
your point, I think in that same chapter, like I think the very last page of chapter 1, there is a section where you think Honda-san is going to take a breath, and it goes, "How could anybody say this job is unstimulating?" And then the panel immediately below that again is just more shouting and more panic and more sort of. So
yeah, which I think
even there is a split second, but it does not give you the reader a chance to feel like you've caught your breath. But yeah, and I think as you said, it is very endearing. But you're not wrong. That is definitely a through line throughout the book.
I think you brought up a good point in there actually too, where you're like, part of the especially in the first chapter, the like quote unquote mission of the book is to show that working in a bookstore is not and will never be boring. Like, and so
Yeah.
maybe that's part of why the tone is the way it is.
Mm.
And Pat, I'll let you talk on this because it seems like you may not have like been like feeling the same scale of franticness that I was, and I would love to talk about that. But like, um, maybe that's part of it too, is just to like, you've got to keep the energy up because we're like showing that working in a bookstore is exciting and pulse pounding and like, oh my God, have my books come in? Have I put my extras in? Have I wrapped them? All these Boys Loves fans are overwhelming me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where the comedy comes from, right? Otherwise, you're just, how many panels of Honda-San restocking the shelves do you want?
No, true. I mean, like, so comedy in comics is interesting because like there are various ways you can do the timing because like Superior Foes of Spider-Man when we talked about that, right? Like there was that sequence where Mach 5's like trying to get out that window and it's like just six
Yeah.
panels of him trying to fit through the window. Like that's paced out very slowly, like compared to this, and still funny. So like
Sure.
there are ways to do it, right? So like I think it's very much that's just the way Honda-san is. Like if they're that way as a person, it's not surprising to me that that's the way they pace a manga. Like that tracks. I get it. Um, but it could be a lot, especially when I feel like because I understand kind of at least the American comics industry a bit, like could walk through some of the industry terms and like some of the behind the scenes stuff and like that
Mhm,
sort of stuff
mhm.
maybe a little bit more easily than someone who might not have any experience with that, I guess.
Sure.
Like if you don't have any like experience or knowledge of that, I think rushing through the pages in that way could be a little bit off-putting. It was not for me. Again, like it felt a little bit frantic to me, but I don't think that really affected my enjoyment of it. I could see
Hmm.
how it would potentially affect your enjoyment of it, depending on who you are and what your tastes are.
So I think reading the first chapter, as in coming into this book blind, not knowing anything about it, I think you're quite right. It's relentless in the first chapter, and that is actually a through line through the book because the book is relentless. It's relentless in positivity. I think it's relentless in kind of like a clear love for the industry and clear love for the customers as well, which I think is such a nice such a nice flip of the normal attitude in retail where the customer is the enemy, very much the enemy. Whereas Honda-san really does see the customer as like they're the quest giver.
Yeah, like
And
even when
Honda-san
the
is on a
customer
quest
is
to
the
try and
enemy,
find
they're
them.
like not an enemy to be like defeated. They're an enemy to be like satisfied, if that makes sense.
Exactly, absolutely agree. And so the book is relentless in all ways, but it's all positive ways, I think. And so it's once you get past that first chapter, I think, and not to say the first chapter isn't good, but just more like I think once you sort of set your baseline with what to expect, then it's much easier to follow and enjoy. And I did still find myself getting lost in certain sequences where there's a lot going on in a page, but certainly, I don't think it affected my enjoyment. I think I just really, I mean, I'm always a huge fan of seeing people who are passionate about stuff. Like no matter what that passion is, well, provided it's legal, of course. Um, I do want to make that very clear for anybody looking to cancel me. But no, but I do love seeing
So you're gonna
like
back up and talk
passionate
about
people.
having sex with a bear there for a second.
I'm
But
gonna
we're
say,
gonna
as
yeah,
long as
dive
yeah,
they're
yeah.
in.
both consenting adults of the same species.
Exactly. Well, consenting adults, yeah, um, capable of consent. Yeah, and I love seeing that in a medium, and I think that is definitely what this book is really really good at. It shows Honda-san is so passionate about, and Honda-san's colleagues as well are just so passionate about providing excellent customer service, and there's a clear love for the customer, and that almost makes the frenetic nature of it so understandable. Like if we got to go back to chapter one with the hunk who's trying to find the book, when Honda-san has realized that they are not able to help, the frantic way to say, oh, you might need to go to this store, they might have it, and like how desperate they are to help,
Yeah,
and they're
it's
not
like
able
so
to.
endearing that they get so hung up not like quite on the I don't know as much English as I need to tell you. They get hung up on the fact that
Uh,
like oh, I can't really help you, and maybe this comic store down the street has it, but they probably don't. Sorry.
Yeah.
Just to cut in that's my favorite, one of my favorite sides where they like flash back to their notes. My meager notes can't cope with this. I'm out of ideas. And says laid back notes that only anticipated times of peace. So good.
Yes. And then the handsome stranger asking what's a yaoi book is just peak. Like love that moment. Yeah.
That I think gets us into the fact that you do kind of need a glossary, I feel like, to understand parts of this book, which I couldn't remember whether there actually was one or not in the back of the print edition. Pat, I think in your notes you noted that there is one, right?
Yes, after having spent like half hour going through my own collecting of the terms and finding definitions, I finally got to the back of the book. It's like, oh, they literally go through every single thing and explain it. Never mind.
Yeah, I was definitely Googling yesterday because and this is what I thought you were going to be talking about when you said the phrase my Google search history earlier, Jado. Like, I was Googling stuff yesterday. I'm like, I hope I'm not wrecking my internet search history doing
You're
this.
No.
You're
No.
fine.
Jonathan goes to incognito mode if he is searching
Hey.
unfamiliar Japanese terms.
The FBI can know, it's fine. So here's the ones that I had written down, which I think I still kind of want to go through just in case
Sure.
like someone didn't know there was a glossary and is listening to this. I don't know. So we've got
There's a glossary, but yeah, go ahead.
go use the glossary. And I already learned how to say this earlier in the podcast and forgot already.
Go for it.
Yaoi.
Yaoi.
Yeah, yaoi.
Yaoi.
It's basically just another name for boys love manga, which is a thing we've discussed on the podcast before.
It is. We've read 2 or 3 yaoi books already.
I think at least 2, yeah. So boys love, I feel like, is explained pretty well in the book, so we don't necessarily need to do that, but it's dudes who are into dudes manga.
And it's interestingly made for women, mostly
Aimed
by
at a female
women.
audience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not always, like, just to be clear as well, it's not always explicit, is it? The yaoi is sometimes it's more the implied and things like that, or is it always
think
it's
quite
explicit.
I was gonna
Yeah,
say, I think
mostly.
there are degrees, but a lot of it is explicit. But
Yeah,
Pat
it's-
may know better than me because Pat knows more about this manga
Yeah.
genre than I do, I think.
Our friend Bryce and previous co-host is a big fan. So yeah,
Oh, good. Yeah.
it's pretty evident for most of them that you know what you're in for. Most of them, as Honda-san has pointed out, most of the covers of these books are pretty explicit, and you know what you're getting into.
I forgot about when they were talking about, do you want me to put covers on those books? I was like, oh yeah, that's the thing Japan does, where they just give you a nice little, like, you're gonna read this on a train, don't be embarrassed cover.
This is a comic that you may not want people in public to know you're reading, so let's put a paper bag over it for you.
Which I've only had one of those moments, like, I feel like once or twice, where I've been like reading a thing on a train and been like, oh, maybe if someone looks over at my direction, they will be like, I was reading the 5th volume of Sex Criminals when I was like on the train from to the Portland airport, and I was like,
oh yeah,
if someone looks at what I'm reading, they're gonna be like
straight to jail. Yeah,
even though Sex Criminals is actually very wholesome.
I love. I think that's great. The Japanese culture has that. Like, they sell these books in stores.
Yeah,
and you can buy them. So funny.
I mean, Angela and I, when we were in Japan, we went around one of these bookstores, mostly because we were just exploring literally every store we could go into. And we went into one that it looked like it was selling a lot of merchandise and stuff like that. And we went in the elevator, I think, and we went upper floor, and then we were on the comic level.
Mhm.
And like, again, not familiar with manga, so I did not have any specific goal, but just wandering the shelves. And I mean, obviously, this is not a criticism or anything. It was very surprising at the explicit nature of the books that we were sort of wondering, did we wander onto the adult level? And it's like, no, this is just it is all like it. But I mean, at the same time, what a wonderful thing that this is like an industry that clearly can support artists, can support writers and stuff. And to see it and it was so busy as well. And so like there was so many, the line for purchases was so long and everything. It's really, really good to see.
Yeah.
And it was surprising to see how many sort of people in suits were there browsing, and how many, like teenagers and stuff were in there and stuff. Like the breadth of demographic was very impressive. So really loved seeing that.
I know you're working so hard to pull me onto a topic we've already almost talked about twice of like you can make a manga about literally anything, and I really want to talk about that, but we're gonna get through the glossary first, and then we're gonna circle back.
Okay, absolutely.
Remind me if I forget, you guys, because we need to do the discussion about the fact that there are manga about literally everything.
It's beautiful. But yeah.
But first, so within Boys Love slash Yaoi.
Yaoi.
Yaoi
I said
Yahweh
Yahweh.
is Yahweh is
Yaoi
very
maybe
different.
in some Yaoi. I don't know. There might be
I would
some.
not
I
be
hope
surprised.
so. There's
I would not be
manga about literally
surprised.
everything, as we're going to talk
Yeah.
about. So there's
Yeah.
top and bottom, which obviously is kind of self-explanatory. While I was
Mhm.
Googling around about that just to make sure I was like in the ballpark for that, though, I did learn about verse, which is you're either top or bottom. Thank you, Teen Vogue, for like the fourth time
you
on this
didn't.
podcast.
Oh, Matthew,
I
come
didn't know about
on.
verse.
Matt, I
Oh,
grew up
boy.
in Zimbabwe and I went to a very conservative Catholic school and I still knew what verse was.
Thank you, Jono. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm vanilla, I guess. I don't know. Anyways, learned
But
about
hey,
verse from
you're educating yourself, and that is, that's nothing
I'm
to
glad
to turn your nose up
Honda-san was
at.
there for you to turn,
I
to open
agree.
your eyes.
I honestly really love when I'm Googling a thing that I'm just like not expecting Teen Vogue to have an insightful article about, and Teen Vogue pops up as the first result. Like, it's a thing that happens like semi-regularly in my life now, and I love it. It's like Teen Vogue, like I should subscribe.
It's been
Maybe you
doing
should.
some
Maybe
heavy
you
lifting,
should.
right? Like they've been having some like a real resurgence in terms of what their audience wants as well. It's great. Yeah.
What this side on that one? So semi and uke is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah,
Are
that's the
terms
one
that
I was
you're-
coming to next. Yeah, so like where those were like martial arts slash
Which
wrestling
is so
terms.
funny to me that the attacker semi and uke is receiver is what it was in martial arts. So I was like, yes,
Yeah,
perfect.
that's
Thank
what it
you.
is. That makes sense. So then we've got to talk about Mo, which is probably not
Moe.
Yeah, Mo.
Yeah. Not Mo.
Which,
Moe.
Moe.
Yeah.
Listen, I did not take Japanese, and I probably should, but
It's
that's a
really
different
easy. You just sound out the words Moe. It's all good.
Sounds like somebody needs some furigana.
Yeah, truly.
Sure does. So that is strong affection toward a character in an anime, manga, video game, etc. Usually because that character is cute.
Yeah.
Does that track? Does that sound correct, Pat?
It's specifically designed characters to elicit those kinds of feelings, yes.
All right. Then we've
What
got
are some examples of characters like that?
I mean, name an anime that you like.
That is
I can't.
very much putting me on the spot. Yeah.
Oh, come on.
You name an anime that you like, Pat.
Yeah.
Like Cardcaptor Sakura is definitely a moe character, like the big eyes.
If I Google that, is that safe to Google?
That is safe to Google. That was on Kids
Okay,
WB,
I'm not making a judgment. I'm just asking the.
I thought for sure both of you would know Cardcaptor Sakura, but
I do. Again, it was on
I
Kids
see.
WB, so it is safe.
it's a cutesy little girl, like designed to be cute to elicit those kind of feelings.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. And sometimes grown-ass men get feelings that are either okay or not okay. about them. That is Moe.
Yeah.
That's Moe as well?
Moe is like cute little
at some point, but yes.
Yeah, it's these kind of cute younger characters that unfortunately, yes, can have adult fans.
Does it cross the line?
Is this
Again,
the
I'm not an expert, like when you order a body pillow, is that when it crosses the line?
I don't want to.
We don't have
Moe
to have
is not not a genre that I feel comfortable exploring at all, but it's there. It is a thing.
Is this the sort of thing of it's not wrong, they're actually a dragon?
Yes. They're thousands of years old. Yeah.
Yep. I'm familiar with that. I'm familiar with that from Fire Emblem, I think, the video game.
Got it.
Yes. Like Digimon, like almost all those characters would be Moe, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Pokemon. Misty, I would probably characterize as Moe.
Everyone hates Misty right now, but that's a
Really?
different
What's
that's a
she do
different podcast.
now? Oh my
She's the
god.
villain of Pokemon TCG
No,
Pocket.
is she really? Oh,
Not the real
you're like,
villain, but like just like the RNG is
I
hilarious.
thought they like had her team Rocket. That'd be awesome. But yeah,
No, no,
okay.
no.
Sorry, that would be Misty, the former gym leader of Cerulean City.
Yes,
Correct. Yes.
Yep. I mean, what the gym leaders were always kind of the villains, or at least the people to face, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my.
And
Back on track. We've got Gyaru. Anyways, that is apparently fashion-focused Japanese women.
Yeah.
I am familiar with Gyaru
Okay.
as a concept because we went to Harajuku, which is, I believe, which is the district where Gyaru used to be very popular, and it was almost like it's almost like an inverse of goth, in terms of it's very colorful, dark
Okay.
tan, like bleach blonde hair, things like that. But when I believe that is very much an older kind of subculture that hasn't really made the transition into later years. But it used to be Harajuku used to be sort of, and I could be completely wrong. So please send your emails to waitingonthetrade@gmail.com. Death threats, etc.
Honestly,
may be
please
directed
do.
there.
Like we are here to learn. We are here to listen
Yeah.
and learn. I
Yeah.
am scrolling
agree.
down the Wikipedia page I had open yesterday, Jono, and it does get much more tan and much more blonde than the first photo I was looking at when I get further down the page.
Yeah, so we did see a couple of Gyaru girls when we were in Japan, but again, like the expectation was that it is like the area is full of it, and apparently it is much more. It's a much quieter subculture nowadays.
Yeah, there are also apparently like a lot of like sub-styles within it. The further I get down this page too, where like there's kind of like a goth version of Gyaru apparently also. Like I don't know.
Okay,
I'll probably put the Wikipedia page in the show notes because it seems interesting.
worth a look. Yeah.
And the next one I had written down was Fujoshi, which is just like a boys love fan. But did you guys know that that translates to like rotten girl or awful girl apparently? Okay.
Yeah.
Because it was a pejorative that has, I think, since been reclaimed, kind of.
Yeah.
Well, good for them.
Yeah.
For them. There should be no shame in enjoying something
Well,
like
just
that,
like
provided
otaku.
it's all consenting. Yeah.
It's awesome consenting. Shoujo, I think we've talked about on the podcast before. That's just like manga that's targeted at young women. And then Ichi was a new one for me.
Oh, really? Well, there you go.
Where the phrase I came across to describe it is like a story manga in this case that's like usually sexualized and designed to titillate, which is what the like spitty American guy who's kind of into Shonen Jump wanted in his when he showed up in his chapter.
So it's the big bosomed anime girls are Yep.
Naughty manga with sexual situations and themes, say the translation notes.
Yep.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So
just to go back to shoujo, there's shonen for boys, so like Shonen Jump. Josei is for older women, and then seinen, I don't know how to pronounce that one, is for older men. Which I think is really cool that they've got those categories, because I feel like Western comics could benefit having more defined.
Yes, we successfully backdoored into there's manga about everything. There's manga for everyone, separated into these categories where like you've got like young adult based on gender roughly, I guess. Like so there's like young adult, teen, adult, like I would assume youth manga also, like I don't know how far like down in age range it goes. I would like there's got to be something there because like
I'd assume it goes pretty young.
The middle grade market in America is wild, so I'd assume the middle grade market in Japan would also be wild.
Hamtaro's got to be super popular. Come on.
Yeah. So like all those sorts of like target audiences, and then you can make a manga about literally anything you want. It could be about skeleton booksellers. It could be about pig pong. It could be about smoking behind a supermarket. It could be about how to chop radishes. No, it's great. Like I love it.
It's beautiful.
So like we talk, like the American market talks all the time about like how do we expand the market, blah blah blah, and not do the same things. It's like, well, guys, like, hey, there are American like non-American like comics about everything also, but like direct market wise, like it's all just stupid superhero stuff, guys. Like you gotta be willing to take a risk on publishing stuff about basketball, or like, and those comics all exist in the marketplace. They just don't exist in like the monthly, like, quote unquote mainstream marketplace. And they are the mainstream marketplace in Japan, like you were talking about, Jono, where like you go up to that floor in the bookstore and it's just like, here's comics, they're about everything. Like, go nuts.
Absolutely. There is no discrimination on this floor. This is open slather. Come and get what you want out, and yeah.
Great.
And like I found the part where the like French publisher salesperson shows up.
I loved the French publisher. Yes.
Really interesting for that reason of like trying to see how people from outside markets are trying to break into the Japanese market, because I feel like if you can, like, that's such an untapped marketplace where the entire culture is built around beating comics. Wrong word.
Whoa, well, some of them,
comics.
depending.
Oh yeah, you're not wrong.
Different thoughts.
Different
like,
strokes, even, yeah.
Yeah, different strokes. So like the entire culture is already like built to read comics. Like they have a whole infrastructure for like people do this thing on trains on the way to work. Like, so if you are like Humanoids, which is the one I'm more familiar of, those two publishers he represented,
Sure.
like getting into that market is like such a good call. I feel like, so Honda-San is like selling the American comics as part of their job, and I do feel like that would be such a tough pitch given how niche some of those are too. And like, again, the formatting is also just like different enough that they're gonna be, I think I've talked about this on the blog. Like, I think I talked about this with you, Pat, when we were buying like those Full Metal Alchemist, like Full Metal editions. Like, for $25, the like amount of care that is put into that book, like
it's so beautiful. It's
the
so well
hardcover,
made.
the like glossy numbers and title, the like the paper quality, all of that, versus like what I can get for $20 out of fucking Marvel. And I'm using a swear word here because Marvel, especially, their paper quality is so shitty. Like I just got the first trade of that Ultimate Spider-Man book, and it's like their paper quality is bad. The book is floppy. Like it feels like it could fall apart at any moment. Like spent like roughly the same price as like a really high quality book. So like, I don't know how like a DC or a Marvel is going to sell books there unless they like repackage them, which is what they do some of the times. Like in France, they sell like basically manga size volumes for like the equivalent of $10, and now DC's starting to finally do that here, and it's working really well. Turns out, wow, imagine. So yeah, like I feel like it would be rough to be the person trying to sell American comics in the Japanese bookstore, given all the like other stuff you're competing against at the same or lower price point.
Yeah, and just trying to make the argument to your shareholders of how radically different that market is and the expectations of the average consumer. But the payoff is what is the population of Tokyo? It's in the hundreds of millions. And you know, if only 10% of that are buying your book, that's untold riches.
Yeah, you're like crushing the American direct market at that point. Like I think the numbers on Batman at this point are roughly 100,000 per month for the monthly issues. Like, let's see what the number for Shonen Jump right now is. You guys vamp while I Google it.
I was very wrong. So it's 14 million in Tokyo, in the city proper. But that's still quite a few people. Like I think that's potentially more than the population of Australia. And that's just a city, and obviously then there's all the outlying things, and yeah, if you can tap into that market, the world will be your oyster.
Okay, so let's even put, I think, Absolute Batman #1, which is a thing that like just launched recently, sold like 250,000 copies, and everyone was going nuts, and it's gone for like a second and third and fourth printing, so the number's probably getting up there. But like first run, let's say 250,000. The first thing that comes up when I Google Weekly Shonen Jump Circulation Japan is a stat from 2019 of an average circulation of over 1.6 million copies per week.
That is nothing to sniff at. Yeah.
Yeah. So like if you do break into the market, you will make some money.
Yeah. And I love that this book does such a good job of showing the clear love and attention that the industry is getting, from the publishers being really obviously on the front foot to try and promote their book, sometimes overly so, to the consumers that are buying up every copy that they can get of particular prints or things like that. Like there's like it's almost like, I mean, bookstores in Australia, and I don't know how they are in America, but bookstores in Australia, I think, struggle. We've had major book retailers go out of business.
Yep.
Even libraries, I think, are experiencing a downturn in customers and stuff like that. And so, to see a book market not only being competitive but thriving is really lovely. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we are a pro bookstore podcast for sure.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah, I
gonna
mean,
ask
do
you,
support your
Jono,
local bookstore. Yeah.
I was gonna ask you, Jono, as like a person who has worked in a library before, like, were any of these issues things that you guys had dealt with? Like, the thing that had come to mind is something you had mentioned previously of like the ability to just shelve like numbers of titles. Like in a library, you're only shelving like maybe a couple copies of a book, I would think at one time. I don't know, but like even
Yep.
then, the ability to have everything on the shelf is wildly limited, I would imagine.
Absolutely. So in Western Australia specifically, there used to be a fantastic service called the Interlibrary Loan System, and what that would mean is how to explain this in a brief way. Funding for your local library in Australia is split. So the state government and the State Library of Western Australia provides a certain amount of funding, and then your local government organization provides the other funding. So usually the state government funding is spent strictly on stock and a few other bits and pieces that I'll cover, and then the local government funding covers local stock purchases and staffing, the building itself, the shelving, all of the actual physical library. So the state government funding covers, like, there's state government stock that you can purchase. So when you look at a book on a library shelf, it'll either have a barcode that starts with the first two letters of the municipality that you're in. So in Albany, for example, it would start with AL. And then you'd have the normal barcode. And then for a state library book, it normally starts with the 3-1, I believe. So if you were living in Albany, which is a regional town where we have about 40,000 people living here, we're about 5 hours away from Perth. Let's say there is a book sitting on the shelf in Port Hedland. Now, Port Hedland is at the very northern tip of Western Australia, so very far away from Albany. If it is a state library item and it is sitting on the shelf in Port Hedland, you used to be able to say, I would like to borrow that book. And that book would then be taken off the shelf. It would be put in a courier satchel, and it would be sent down to Albany, where you would borrow it with your library card as normal. And there would be no cost to you, because that was the state library system, interlibrary loan system. It has changed recently, unfortunately, where we're supposed, I don't work there anymore, but they are supposed to direct people to use ebooks and things like that instead, which is absolutely travesty. The huge problem. It's a lot of, it's not just senior people who don't want to use e-readers. It's also the fact that ultimately your taxes are buying these books. You shouldn't be restricted from borrowing them, and so on.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that's a bummer.
yeah, huge bummer. But our library system in Albany, so we had I will drop his name. Paul Nielsen is the manager of arts and culture for the city of Albany. And I think he and others had a really fantastic idea of doing a consortia. So basically, there's lots of small regional towns in our area, the Great Southern, and Paul and others worked with those regional towns to do a consortia purchase of the library management system they were all kind of on older library management systems, and Albany was on a newer one. I'm not going to name that one because that's a big company, and they don't deserve the press, although they're decent. But sorry, this is getting really into the weeds.
No, let's do
but
it.
I promise it does pay off. And Paul basically, with others, negotiated that all of these smaller libraries would be able to basically share the library management system, so that your small town of let's say Bremer Bay, which might only be a few thousand people, would be able to have a modern library management system. And more importantly, also negotiated with the state library that if there was a local copy of a book on Bremer Bay's shelf, as a borrower in Albany, you would be able to say, well, I would quite like to borrow that book. And previously, local copies were not part of that interlibrary loan system because they were purchased by the funding given by the local government, so that you can access a certain copy that was purchased by the city of Albany. But under this new system, it meant that basically all stock on the shelf was available for loan within this consortia arrangement. And that was really fantastic, not just for obviously for people living in Albany, but if you're in Bremer Bay, which has a much smaller library,
Yeah, that opens
you
you up
could
to a
still
much
say
bigger selection.
huge selection, and not just Albany and Bremer Bay, but all the way up to I believe they incorporated quite a few libraries. And again, unfortunately, with the scaling back of interlibrary loans, I think that's hit that quite hard as well, which is terrible. But like for a brief shining moment, all of the borrowers in regional towns had immense access. And I think that I hope that comes back, because that is for people living in those regional areas. I mean, even the internet infrastructure is not really there to support them accessing e-resources. So for them to be able to go to their local library and order a book from another library and have it delivered free of charge is really, really important, because there just is not the ability to have every single book on the shelf. And the stopgap is where a book is not available through interlibrary loans, that library can then purchase a copy. Well, that unfortunately is not much of an option. In some cases, the books are rare or out of print, and I think the Honda-San book goes beautifully into the frustration of trying to find a book when it's out of print, and how cagey publishers can be when it comes to that. And in some cases, the state library might have archival copies that previously would have been available to people, and I'm not clear on what the access for that is anymore under these changes. So unfortunately, the West Australia system used to be first in class, and it is not at that point anymore.
That's rough to hear. Like, it's always rough to hear when things are going backwards instead of forwards.
Yeah. But I think that's probably why I resonated so much with one particular chapter that really resonated with me, having worked in a library, was the is it chapter 3? I think.
Are you talking
Lost in
about the
Manga?
book recommendations one?
That is hands down. That was a question I would dread.
What would you recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember I have two cases that I remember so clearly. One was this person asking me, what would you recommend? And I remember asking them, and they were I think they were a fantasy reader. Like they read lots of fantasy, science fiction and fantasy, and I asked them endless questions about what they would enjoy. And I even enlisted my my colleague, who he has an encyclopedic knowledge of science fiction, fantasy, anything from the 1900s onwards. And I think we narrowed it down to a few books that we recommended and stuff. And I'll never forget that person coming back in, and they dropped the book through the book return. And I was like, oh, and did you enjoy that? Like, no, it was terrible. And just the breaking of your heart after you've spent so endlessly long trying to find something. And another was a person who was looking for recommendations for their child. And it's always difficult when it's a child, because age-wise, you don't know what their reading level is. Are they reading at a young adult level? Do they need some more more guide rails on their books? But this was a young adult who was they were kind of just getting into a reading level, and I think the book that we recommended was The First Artemis Fowl by Owen Colfer. Great book, in my opinion. And I remember sort of being like, look, this is a good book. This is the theme sort of thing. And the mum going, I'm not sure, but I'll try it. And blow me down. They read the entire series, and I think that led them into is it Sabriel? by Garth Nix.
Mm.
And then I highly recommend that series as well. That's Sabriel by Garth Nix. That's a series about necromancy. Garth Nix is a fantastic Australian author. Highly recommend Sabriel. And that led them onto Sabriel. That then led them into, I think they started reading. I think they then dipped into Percy Jackson,
Sure.
and then they went and so
sense.
you know, it was just great sort of seeing like this one book can kind of be this domino that leads them into other great books, and obviously not all recommended by me at all, but you know, like how they really they were kind of an indifferent reader, and then finding something that they enjoyed just latched their interest, and they took off.
That's got to be great. That's got to feel amazing.
That's the feeling that you want. You don't want that first experience.
First one, yeah.
Right.
Your blood turns cold whenever somebody goes, "Could you recommend something for me?" Well, I'm
Recommendations
going
are
on
always so hard. Like, so Pat and I have been reading comics together monthly, roughly for how many years at this point, Pat? Like
4, 3,
maybe
around there.
4-ish, yeah, somewhere out there.
Yep.
And, like, I feel like I have a pretty good like finger on like what Pat will and will not like and why.
And
I still just randomly miss every once in a while.
Well, you can see why I am now hesitant to recommend comics after the first concrete block that dragged the podcast into the water and nearly drowned it.
Truly was not that bad. Truly.
No, again, like we have yet to have a bad discussion about a comic, even if the comic itself is not great. So
I think that is crucial. No, I do agree. But I think that, like, I mean, for my part, I think all the recommendations that you guys do have always been interesting. I don't think that we have had a bad recommendation ever. I don't know. Maybe there's episodes that you guys haven't released where the host has just gone, "I hated this book. I cannot read it."
no, I mean all of those episodes have been released.
No, we've released every one of those. Yeah,
all of those are out there. Oh no, actually, there is one that's not released. I forgot about that.
it's true, but that was for other reasons. Yeah.
The House of X, Powers of X conversation that we didn't record.
Oh.
Kat still just talks to me about how that's her least favorite comic book she has ever read.
I still think we should have recorded that. I think
We should have. It would have been a really good one. The lost episode.
I love the idea of like the cursed archive. And I mean, you know, looking at when Honda-San is asked, very similarly to myself, like when Honda-San is asked, what is there good? Is there any good manga that you'd recommend? And like just the panic and the, you know, like how immediately like trying to enlist your peers because maybe they've got some secret knowledge that you don't have.
Well, it's
and
the
also,
double-edged sword of how wide the genre is, like we were just talking about. Just like
exactly,
literally anything you could possibly want is a manga. So
Yep. I think the Bible is a manga, isn't it? Like the
there
Christian
has to
Bible.
be. Yeah.
One of my favorite scenes in the book was that scene where I think it's Pumpkin-Face Bookseller or whatever, like walks in and like everything just is like dead silent for a second. It's like one of the few pauses in the book, and then it's like, oh, I wrote down exactly what she had said, but it's basically just like,
the recommendation that they wanted. Yeah.
A moving shoujo manga, no more than 3 volumes, something even a man in his 40s will find interesting. Like that's the like ominous statement, like ooh.
And they're all twitching at the in that scene, yes.
Well, and then they all become like doctors. Did you note that thing that's like on their forehead? They've got like the doctor abandoned like reflecting thing. Like
it's a trivia show thing in Japan.
Oh, is that what that is? I thought it was like we've all become like manga doctors trying to recommend the like solution to this problem.
I'm almost positive it's a trivia show thing.
I'm sure you're right and I'm wrong. It was still funny the way I thought it was too.
I did love the sudden manga sommelier round 1.
Yes.
Yeah. Which that's a random thing that there's manga about that Cal actually bought for me. There is a manga about wine
for sure. There has to be. Yes.
Oh, that was don't spoil my recommendations, please.
Oh, okay, sorry.
He does it all the time. All the time.
Sorry.
I did like the payoff to that is the customer went for Berserk, which was completely opposite of everything they asked for.
So in the fan translation, they say something about Berserk being nonfiction, and I'm like, that's not true. I've heard about Berserk, and that's got like angels and demons, and someone punches through the moon in it.
Yeah, that's a fantasy for sure.
Yeah. So what? I'm looking over the like outline of chapters here to make sure we kind of talk about all of them at least a little bit. We talked about chapter 1 a lot. We talked about chapter 2, I feel like, with the boys love stuff. I didn't realize boys love was going to be such a focus of the book. I feel like it pops up a lot, which that's probably just because that's what popular at
I
the
think it's
time
a
it was
very,
written and
very
drawn.
popular category, yeah,
Yeah.
of
Um,
manga.
so that makes sense. It was just kind of like I didn't expect what 2/7 of the book roughly to be
It's
like
also easy
very
comedy
boys love.
beats, right?
Yeah,
True,
kind of, I
exactly
guess.
right. Yeah, reacting to the questions being asked.
Chapter 3 is kind of the like the recommendations chapter. We talked about that a
Mhm.
little bit. Chapter 4 is kind of more about the colleagues at the bookstore and also the process of like ordering and stocking books on time. Which we
Loved
talked
it.
about
Yep.
that. The one thing that we didn't talk about in that is like Honda-san like maps out the actual like book release calendar for I think one of the holiday months. And it's just
Yeah.
like there's stuff releasing every single day through the month. Like
Yeah, I think
It
Kadokawa is like a massive publisher. They handle a whole lot of stuff.
like Honda-san's anxiety makes a lot of sense when you see that calendar. Yeah.
yeah.
And that's
Like and
only
so
one publisher, by the way. That's not
yeah.
like,
Yeah. That's not Viz. That's not like
yeah, like that's only a part of what they're dealing with. So I can't imagine.
Yeah.
yeah. And like all those books where you have to like actually stock the extras in the books too, they don't like come together.
Yeah,
You
that's
gotta like slide
insane.
it in.
That is
Like
crazy to me. That is absolutely crazy to me. And the expectation that the bookseller, the person stocking the shelf, is also the person doing the ordering and the
They
like.
shrink wrap every book.
and
That's
like they don't put the like put
insane.
it out on the right release date because if you put it out on the right release date, you get blacklisted or whatever.
Yeah.
Like
No
That's
when I
so
pressure,
used
but
to
much
we will
work.
never let
Good
you
Lord.
sell our books ever again.
when I
Yeah.
used to get Shonen Jump in the mail, every so often it would come with like a promo like Yu-Gi-Oh card or something, and like so someone's
Yeah.
obviously like individually stocking all those, and I think all those came in like plastic wrap also because they were all getting transported through the mail. But like
That's
made
amazing.
me think of that where like every so often a Shonen Jump would show up and it's got like a promotional Blue Eyes White Dragon in it, and like someone's got to put that in that book somewhere. So we talked about that one a bit. We talked about like the publisher's salespeople and how kind of crazy they are a little bit, and like the constant back and forth of hey, sell my book, but also I don't have books for you to sell.
That is my favorite quote of Plague Mask is I'll be waiting for your concrete ideas to resolve this issue.
That
Just the
sequence is
quiet
my favorite
menace.
sequence in the book. I
Aren't you
think
Yes.
tired of
Yeah.
having this conversation? And everyone's freaking out. I'm like, oh my God.
And then they're just like, I think we probably resolved that situation afterward.
It's great.
I guess the one we haven't talked about as much actually is like the customer service training one. Like I don't think we've really gone to depth. Do you guys have thoughts on that one?
It's bone chilling. It's like, ugh.
It yes, yes. It was probably my favorite just for the because you know like I think the stereotype of Japan is polite.
Mhm.
It's and certainly when we were in Japan, I think the level of customer service that we received throughout Japan, it was never short of excellent. Like, and I mean, like the worst customer service that we received in Japan would probably still be like a customer service experience that we would rave about in Australia.
Sure.
I mean, I remember the sink was leaking very slightly in a hotel room that we were staying in. And so, you know, I went downstairs and I was like, oh, you know, the sink is leaking. You know, it's not a huge problem. It's, you know, obviously there's a drain and stuff, but just letting you know. And I was sitting upstairs reading my book, and there was a knock at the door, and there's the hotel manager with a tradesperson, and they come in and they look at the sink, and then the hotel manager comes out, bows really deeply to me, and he's like, "I'm very sorry, we will not be able to fix this today, so we will need to move you to a different room." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's no problem at all." And he's like, "The housekeeping will be here to collect all of your things and move them." And I was like, "Oh, is the room on a different floor?" And he's like, "No, you're just moving to the room next door." And I was like, "I can probably move my stuff." He's like, "No. We will move everything for you." And so everything gets moved, and I'm sort of because Angela had ducked out to go and get something from the convenience store or something, and I thought I packed everything, but I'd missed. There was like this little toy she'd gotten in a gacha
Sure. Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
We completely it was sitting on the sink, like next to the tap, and the housekeeper brought it to us in a wrapped plastic bag. Like she'd put plastic. It looked like a gift wrapped, and she was like, "Oh, you'd left this as well. You know, is this okay? I've brought this," and I was like, "Yes, no, you've been amazing. Thank you so much." But it was just the level of just like for a tiny amount of water that was not really going to bother us at all. Like just the amount of work that goes into it. So to see, I guess that makes the customer service training that Honda-San undergoes make more sense, because it is chilling at, I guess, like, what happens to the people that don't pass customer service training in Japan,
This is
Matt?
what I've
Because
been
I
thinking
didn't see
about
any
for
of
the past,
them.
like, day. It was like, that's both really cool that they hold themselves to that high of a standard, but at the same time, like,
Exhausting.
yeah, like, guys, you don't have to do this to
Absolutely.
yourselves. Like, it's fine. The water is dripping. Like, your recommendation's not quite as good. The bookshelf's not stocked. I could ask you where the book, like, there's a line it's in the bonus chapter actually, where like
Yeah.
Honda-san's feeling like kind of down, and I wrote this one down. I have and this is the fan translation, so I don't know if it's the same in
Oh,
your guys',
sure.
but I have no sense of responsibility and I'm mentally weak. What? It's just books, guys. Like, no one's dying here. It's gonna be okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And in that customer service one, the other thing that I really liked, and I think portrays how customer service works really well, is the Buddha guy who was doing the customer service training, his like to show how his demeanor changes so sharply, his like head rotates to a different mask
Yes.
from like the grumpy mask to the smile mask. I really enjoyed that.
It's all done really well. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I did love Honda-san obsessing over that other person who can't smile, and how, sort of like it's like a panic, and then at the end of it, like, good work today, nice smile, and she's like, she can smile like normal.
Genuine smile.
That's
just,
her
like,
actual smile.
just don't have the ability to force it.
Yeah. I found it both sort of like chilling and also just like deeply amusing. I think if you were to do this kind of training in Australia, purely by example, it would be so many people would be like, yes, I want to take it because it's a day I don't have to work.
Yes, yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah.
Whereas here they're all on edge because they like, oh, I have to pass this.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
It did, the whole book in this chapter in particular did sell me on the fact that like I do feel like everyone should be like required to work a customer service job of some sort at some point in their life, just to
I can't.
understand
Yeah.
how it works and like how not shitty, like shitty's not the right word for the feeling, but how like the feeling you get when you're on the other side of that transaction and you're the one who has to do the service, like
You have to
what
capitulate.
that
Yeah.
is like. Yeah, like
Yeah.
you have to
Some
fulfill
people
the
need to learn empathy. Yeah, I absolutely agree.
I think that's the chapter that stuck with me the most between read 1 and read 2, actually, where like when I was rereading that chapter, I was like, oh, I don't need to reread this chapter. I remember how this went.
Sure.
Yeah, and also that's the one chapter that I guess that doesn't take place at all in the bookstore, except maybe the first thing where Honda-san is nominated as tribute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe it's
Yeah.
also because one of the reasons I think the book is a little bit maybe hard to connect with on like the character level. Like I couldn't really tell you anything about the quote unquote characters, people, whatever in the book, except for maybe Honda-san and like Plague Mask. Maybe like there's some traits for some of them, but for a lot of them they're interchangeable to me. Like
Yeah.
that one is very focused on people doing a thing as opposed to
Mhm.
being focused on the thing, like the books, the industry, the whatever. So maybe
You
that's
do
kind of
get
why
to you get to know the other colleagues in further volumes.
okay, that's good to know. Because
Okay,
like
cool. Yeah.
I am considering reading more volumes of it, Pat. I'll consider it depending on how the
Oh,
outcome
so
of our
good, so
discussion.
good. Yeah. No, I always forget that there's bonus manga at the end because of course Honda can't stop making comics. But it really like that one really struck me where they get chewed out on the phone by a rude customer and they're just dealing with the fact that they have negative thoughts about the career they've chosen. But the one kind customer turns it around for them at the
That
end.
one kid who reads Artemis Fowl and then reads 18 other fantasy series.
Yeah.
Love it. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that, like, I think that's the thing about Honda-San that's the book that really strikes me is it's incredibly wholesome, even when it's dealing with boy love, etc. And I think to bring
Which
it back
can
to
be
our
wholesome.
earlier,
Can be wholesome.
can be no, absolutely. And look, I'm certainly not here to yuck anybody's yum when
Well,
it's
unless they're into
consenting
bears, then
to
we are. But
consenting
that's a different
adults.
Okay,
topic.
Well, consent is key. Consent is key. You know,
yeah.
it's the three S's, Matt. It's safe, sane, and it's consensual.
There you go.
No, wait, hang on.
No.
But I think that there's it's the wholesomeness, right? And it's to bring it back to our earlier discussion about certain subcultures that can become quite toxic. I'm sure, and obviously we do see very small aspects of it, but there is like there's a purity in this that kind of it's not naive in its wholesomeness. It's not saying that the negative sides of the culture don't exist or anything like that. It's just that Honda-san definitely chooses to focus on the positives of the culture, and I think that that's really really enjoyable. Really enjoyable side of it is just that it tends to try and show the positive rather than the negative, and in doing so, it makes me more interested in that culture.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I think there's like in the God. So this is another aspect of the book I connected with. Awful at languages. The Yahweh girl. Nope, it says Yahweh again. Yeah.
Yowie.
Yowie.
Yep.
Yowie.
There is like a line that we kind of walk up to where they're just like a little bit overly into it to the point of being potentially too pushy, like kind of rude, that sort of thing. But we never cross that line. And I think it is very specifically like the thing you were talking about, Jono, where like we're very focused on the positives of fandom in this book. Like we're not gonna step over the line into being like fandom can actually become toxic. We're just gonna like skirt right up to the edge of it because we really want people to just be like enthusiastic about the things they like. And I'm into that. That works.
Yeah. And I think to certainly to that point that when we do see negativity, it's mostly around not being able to help the customer rather than this customer was incredibly rude to me and I hate that and that sort of thing. But I part of me has to wonder, and I might undercut my previous point, but do you think Honda-san's colleagues and potentially boss at the bookstore are aware of this book? And does that enforce a certain amount of self-censorship that Honda-san has to engage in? Like it's that knife edge of like, I want to show my job, etc., but I actually can't show my job because it will cause problems for me at my job.
They do sort of address it a little bit in future volumes. It is
okay. Interesting.
They do talk about the fact that they're writing up.
In a good way, or is the...
Yeah. I mean, the Honda talks about the fact that they've been talked to by the higher-ups of their bookstore about what they can and can't. Like, what the line that they're walking. Okay. It isn't negative, and I think most, at least through the manga, none of the coworkers seem to have an issue.
That's good. That is good. Yeah, and I like having a clear boundary, like for the work to say, yeah, you can keep doing it, just don't do this.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I would be very surprised if in Japanese culture there is not some sort of talking to about like the rules you must obey when you're making a manga about your workplace. Like that would be shocking.
There is manga about everything. Like, yeah.
Well, no, not even that there like are strict rules, but like the fact that you wouldn't as an employee to a boss, talk about that and establish
Mhm,
like ground rules for it. Like
Well, I mean, as we
in
talked
what
about,
I
most
know
of
of that
this,
work culture, like
yeah, most of this is hectic, like stress. Oh, we got to do so much stuff. Oh, I'm working overtime over and over again. There's a whole negative, like black companies of like being worked to death in Japan.
yeah,
So I'm
mhm.
sure Honda had a conversation about, all right, this is funny, but don't give us negative PR about working you too hard.
Yeah, yeah, and to I'm aware of the impact that a manga can have, such as I believe with Drops of God, which is a manga about wine. It had like a real impact on wine sales, and so there must be some part of management that is going, oh well, maybe this is going to be good for the
get these
bookstore.
people into the
Sure.
bookstore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's definitely a scene where Honda-san mentions like because they're working overtime, they won't be able to go home and draw their manga that night. So like
Yeah.
the other employees definitely do know about the manga.
100%. Yeah.
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 I mean, this watching the anime definitely opened me up to being more open to explore manga. I think
Hmm.
the Witch Hat Atelier series from your recommendation, right, Matt? Was it you or was it?
I have recommended it, yeah. Like that one's a good one
Okay.
that I've been reading currently.
Yeah. So it's doing its job.
No, and that's great. And I think similarly, because I mean, I don't want to be a philistine about it, but it's very hard to know where to start with manga, and
Sure.
because of the potential toxic nature of some subcultures, you can be put off by I think because I think otaku is the slang term for geek or nerd, right?
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
and that is, I remember that being mentioned in World War Z, Max Brooks, where there's an otaku who like doesn't realize that the zombie, or does realize that the zombie apocalypse is happening, but doesn't leave home. Love that little that book particularly. But in Western culture, there is a pejorative term. What is it for somebody who's obsessed with Japan?
A weeb.
Yes, yes, that's what weeb, and that has such a negative connotation. And it's not one that would put me off from reading manga, for example, but it is just because of that. I guess that stereotype. You tend to assume, oh,
Sure.
it's I don't want to read books about scantily clad women
Yeah.
running around it, and that's a very unfair characterization of manga. To be clear, yes, those do exist,
I was
and
gonna
people
say
can
they do
enjoy those for
exist.
what they are. But
I mean, or the
that is
moe
certainly not.
stuff. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
you don't want to
Yeah.
be.
Well, yes, you do not want to go to jail. And in Australia, you can go to jail for, I think, images that portray people that might not be 18, as has
Sure.
happened in the past. So, like, there is like a real, like, I guess there is a real stereotype of these kinds of books. So this book, beautiful in I guess, airing out some of those stereotypes and showing that it is not just these things, although it is these things too.
It is
Sometimes,
also these
you're
things.
It is both. Yeah.
sometimes you will find a father looking for a book about
Unbeknownst.
It's
Unbeknownst. I don't know if they would
unbeknownst.
still.
It's so endearing
Unbeknownst.
that okay, so either A, he was lying, or B, he did not understand what he was looking for at all, even after seeing the cover.
The cover of it. Yeah. You would
Yeah,
think.
yeah. Because she's not. They say that's clearly freaking Gontama. Is
It's
that
a
a thing as well?
So Gintama is a long running manga. It's like one of the longest running. It's a comedy manga. It's just the character that's being depicted. It's not actually the title of the porn comic.
I
It's just
see. So
it's
this
the
is
character
this
put
is
into a sexy position. Yeah.
I know the term for this. This is a Rule 34.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah,
So
there we go. See, I have
this
learnt
is
things
my
from the
like
internet.
short explanation of this based on what I know, which again is incomplete, but like because the comics industry is so popular in Japan, there's also like a popular
comics.
like sub industry, yeah, of like fan comics, which would be kind of like
Mhm.
zines for us, but it's like fan comics about properties. Like one of the ones I think I've seen is like Sonic the Hedgehog like fan comics that got like
Oh
super
god.
popular and then had to get shut down.
Be very,
Um,
very careful when you search for
yeah,
Sonic.
yeah, yeah. So these fan comics don't go googling around. You might find some stuff you might not want to.
Yeah.
But like it's just like a weird, popular kind of underground industry of of like very popular fan comics that like are about quote unquote official like characters, but they're not officially licensed, but they exist and they're super popular. And like
Yeah.
again, I don't
And
know as
they
much about it as I should, but like that's my understanding of it.
Yep.
no, that's I mean I'm familiar with the idea obviously of people taking licensed properties and making
It's like if you sold fanfic, I guess. Like
yeah,
for
yeah,
real,
so
for
so that was
real.
going to be my question, was that they actually sell these in stores?
Some stores, yeah.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Um, but yeah, so yeah, very wholesome book overall, and I think uh, I did find myself getting lost in the art sometimes, and that is potentially because I don't read a lot of manga, so there's a lot going on.
That's fair.
And I mean, I will defend that as well, because I think sometimes with other comics they can be a bit homogenized with how much they'll have. Like there's almost like it's like that. There's this thing that you hear about in screenwriting where there's rules of screenwriting that you have
Oh
to
yeah.
follow, and if you don't follow them, your script won't be any good, etc. And it's like, well, actually, like that's not a rule. That's just what's been successful in the past.
Right.
And that if you apply that same template to absolutely everything, it's not going to work. And so as much as I may have struggled with this, it did mean that the book stood out a lot compared to other comic books that I've read. So I do applaud it for that.
Was thinking about your rules of screenwriting thing in our off mic conversation. I was just going like, do you want Star Killer Base? That's how you get Star Killer Base, you guys.
Well, I mean, precisely, and like that is like, love it or hate it, that is a criticism that is leveled against Marvel movies of late, is that they all follow a very predictable plot, and the
Oh
the
yeah, especially the
the
like
bad guy
origin
is normally
ones.
blue light. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess on that note, do we want to jump to recommendations? Did you guys have anything else you wanted to talk about for Skull-Face Bookseller?
I just in general, I really like the art in this book. Yes, it is hectic and frantic, but I like the little, whenever it's like focused, I like the detailed shots of the characters, and then I really enjoy like the cute like quick sketches of Honda-san in the back, just like usually stressed or like freaking out quietly in the background.
No, I will say I don't want less images of Honda-san's like skeleton jaw dropped and them like bleeding out their mouth or something,
Yeah.
whatever's going on in that panel. Like they're all funny, they're all great. It's just like the pacing it took a little bit to get used to. And like Jana was talking about learning to read right to left at the same time. Like that definitely is a skill. I remember like when I was getting into manga a little bit more as a teenager being like, I gotta figure this out. So like if you're doing both things at the same time where you're like learning the right to left reading skill and then also like going into this book, which is very fast. um yeah, it's kind of a crash course, I feel like.
Yeah.
But it
I
not
mean,
a good one.
I think
I
once
think
it clicks, but it does take a little while.
absolutely agree, and I think lest there be any shadow of a doubt, I think it's a beautiful book, and I think that the fact that Honda-san is both the writer and the artist, it speaks very highly of them too. Like I think that that's an incredible achievement to be working a day job and then going home and drawing this. And I'm sure it went through a period of editing or whatever, but maybe it didn't. I don't know the specific process of publishing manga, but this is a beautiful book when you keep that in mind as well. Like I think it really stands out, and I think there is so much humor panel to panel, that just that scene of Nominated as Tribute where you've got the manager shoots with the arrow straight into the skull. That's fantastic, and
Yeah.
I really I like. I mean, I might have gotten lost in the art at times, but I do agree with you that I think it is a beautiful book. And I think I solid recommendation.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
like I like that there are only 3 more volumes of it because I like a manga series that doesn't go for
Yes.
75 volumes. Like, I'm just
Yeah.
not about that life at this point in my life. Like, I'm too old. I can't read 150 volumes of One Piece. Sorry, guys. Like, so the fact that
Yeah.
it's only 4 volumes means I am much more likely to read to the end of it because I did enjoy it and it's short.
Yeah. So you would, sorry, Matt, I just want to clarify, you would read more of Skull-Face Honda?
Yeah, I think that I am meshed with the tone at this point, and like I appreciate Honda-san as a person for sure, and also I'm very about that like inside baseball bookstore life. Like I
Oh,
don't know if I'm
Slice
sure
of Life is beautiful.
I
It's
must have
really
told
good.
both of you guys at this point, but like my I would lose a lot of money in retirement plan is to just like open a coffee shop like comic shop coffee shop combination. Like I want to do
Oh,
that. Like that's what I want. Cause like then
call it
it's like a hangout space and you've got your comic books.
the
Am
coffee
I calling it
stain or
that?
something like that.
Coffee stain. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
literally. So I was talking with a coworker about this because we took a business trip and there was a comic slash coffee shop and he's also a nerd, so we went to it because he wanted some magic cards and I wanted comics. Um, and so I was talking about how I think I would just name it the dumbest thing around. Like I would name it like Madison Comics and Coffee. Like that's it. Because like I just want it to be Googleable. I want people to know what they're getting. I don't think it would have a
Sure.
fun
I
name.
like that. Yeah. No, but I think that there's something to be said for that, definitely.
Like make it as idiot proof for people to know what they're getting as possible. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's my I would lose millions of dollars in retirement and be happy about it. Dream.
Yeah. And Pat, you have read more. Does
Have
the book, does the through line of positivity continue?
yeah. It's a very wholesome story.
Fantastic.
I
Yeah.
Yeah.
love when Jono does our work for us. It's great.
Oh,
This is why we let
I'm asking these questions purely for myself. Like, I forget that
I
we're
know.
recording this.
I
Like,
no, I
somebody's
know,
listening
Jado,
and
but
going, "Oh,
like
good, I'm
you're
so
like,
glad."
I'm looking at the discussion guide, and I'm like, oh yeah, next I should make sure to ask Pat that the next 3 volumes do actually like keep up in quality, and I do want to read them. But Jado's already on top of it because his natural
Yeah.
curiosity is
No, they
taking
do.
us to the place the podcast should go.
I mean, Matt,
They
remember, I have to have in my notes, do not talk too much about Spider-Man.
We all need to have that in our
Just the
notes,
back of your hand every time. Yeah.
Jado.
Stop talking about Star Wars, Jonathan.
Not again, not again. Oh, all right. With that, should we move into recommendations?
Let's do it.
All right,
Sounds good.
Jono, I feel like you've got some, and I potentially almost stepped on you already, so you should go first.
No, I'm done. But look. I think in the vein of manga that explores something that potentially that you don't normally get to see or don't think about is definitely Drops of God. It's a fascinating look at wine, and I think you can actually learn a lot about wine from reading it. And I think it's a really beautiful manga. I thank Callum, who's been on the show before, Callum Smith, of course, hugely for introducing me to it. And I think, really highly recommend that one as a manga to read in that vein of behind, slice of life, but also tells a great story. The art is also quite beautiful in terms of how it makes the wine and stuff appear. Yeah, all ticks as far as I'm concerned. In terms of anime series, and Pat, I will be very interested to hear if this is one you have A, watched, and B, agree with this recommendation.
Sure.
But there is I think it's called Food Wars. And it is an anime series, and I will warn you, there are some risque bits, so don't go in watching this with your grandmother.
Or
But
do.
it
Or
or
do.
do. I mean, hey,
Depends what
look,
she's
not
into.
to
We're
yuck
not here to yuck
anybody's
anyone's
grandmother's
yum.
yum. Yeah, absolutely. It
And there's
does.
a lot
It
of
also
yum in
does
there.
and there is a lot of yum, specifically the food sort. Yeah, and it does a great job of exploring both food culture in Japan and also behind the scenes of being a chef,
Mhm.
and also I think like some really fascinating history of Japanese chefs traveling to France and things like that. Like really, again, stuff that you don't tend to kind of think about. Um, and okay, so that is anime TV series. For real TV, that is wholesome and is also kind of slice of life and very similar, I feel, in tone to Skull-Face Honda. It is got to be Joe Pera Talks With You. Um, if you haven't seen it, Joe Pera Talks With You. It's short episodes.
So
It is
good.
so good. And in a similar way, it doesn't pretend that there isn't negativity in the world. It just tries to focus more on the positivity. And that's not to say that there aren't challenges and that there aren't difficulties in the show. But I mean, the episode Joe Pera takes you for a fall drive is just, it's a stunning exploration of of Halloween, of taking a fall drive in your car, and it's just absolutely beautiful. Joe Pera talks with you. Highly recommend it. And then finally, if you have, conceivably 60 hours spare, play Persona 5 because you get to go around Tokyo as well. And that is a lot of fun. And again, you get to kind of see some of Japanese life that you might not have otherwise considered. So yeah, those recommendations. So just quick cliff notes for anybody who did not want to hear all of that and has jumped forward. Drops of God, Food Wars, Joe Pera Talks with You, and Persona 5.
Is this two Jono recommendations? Yeah, you should, Matt. You should.
Ain't nobody got
Atlas
time
Games.
for Persona.
Don't miss.
Honestly, Persona 5 is a really it's a fascinating look at generational divide and how younger generations can be treated. It's a beautiful look at Japanese culture, and it was ahead of its time with its exploration of cancel culture and people being allowed to get away with things when they really shouldn't have been allowed to get away with, like because of position or because of I highly recommend it.
And
you also get to
okay.
Please carry on, Pat.
No, I was going to say the latest Atlas game, Metaphor Refantatio, is also fantastic. And guess what it deals with? Choosing a leader through democracy.
Yes.
How appropriately timed.
No, we don't need to worry about that soon. So I don't need to play that game because it won't be applicable to my life.
Yeah,
because your election was or was not rigged, because I was getting a lot of conflicting information about that. Right
we still don't know, Jono. I'll let you know when we know.
Fair enough.
The consensus right now is not rigged, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So those are mine. Please go ahead. Yeah.
I've got one. I've only got one because I only ever bring one because I feel like everyone else always brings an overwhelming amount of suggestions. My recommendation is Public Domain, which is an American direct market comic that is very much a manga, and there's a reason that it's kind of like a manga. So it's a Chip Zdarsky book, who those who have listened to my recommendation to read Sex Criminals will recognize Chip Zdarsky as the artist of Sex Criminals. It's Chip writing and drawing, which is awesome because Chip's sense of humor and character is great. And so Chip hosts a rival podcast to us. It's not a rival podcast to us because we're not in the same league, but they host a podcast called Manga Splaining with some people. And so that's basically the conceit is three people who are in. Yeah, I know, it's a great title, right? Again, we're not in the same league. We're not rivals.
It's no Madison Comics and Coffee though.
Whatever. Again, we should have just called the podcast Comics Book Club Podcast. It should just be that. I think that might actually be taken though, so that might be the issue there. Come on. Anyways, back on track. So Chip through
it's actually called Public Domain.
It's called Public Domain for reasons, but so it's called Public Domain, and how it ended up getting made is Chip does this manga podcast with people where they're introducing him to different manga, and he's realizing that there can be manga about literally anything, whatever niche interest you have, you can make a manga out of it. And he's like, well, what's my niche interest? Really, the only thing I know about and have weird esoteric knowledge of trivia of that I love that much is the American comics industry. So he's making a comic about the travails of the American comics industry, kind of in the same way this one's about bookstores. This is about creators who got fucked over in the past, the media juggernaut stuff that's going on now, artists, writers, who gets paid when, who doesn't get paid when, what is it like to actually publish a comic, and it's not nuts and bolts process stuff. It's very much rooted in these characters he's created and these two guys who created a character together back in the day, and then one of them gets the rights to the comics while the other one like keeps the rights to the movies or whatever. Like, and
yeah.
all very funny. And like, if you like the tone of this, where the characters are all like, I don't know, fun and endearing, like you will like the Chip Zdarsky comic book Public Domain. So that would be my recommendation because it's in the same ballpark. It's like kind of the closest thing in American direct market comics that you're going to get to a weird niche interest manga.
Cool.
Yeah, I like that. That sounds really interesting.
Got what you got?
I mean, first and foremost, if you like this at all or have any interests, I can't recommend the anime adaptation more. Like, it's fantastic. It really does a good job. And maybe part of the reason why I wasn't thrown by how hectic this comic is because I first consumed it as an anime, and the anime just does such a great job of the characters and the situations and everything. So check that out. It's on Crunchyroll. I know that for sure. Otherwise, I would say if you're looking for another manga that has similar comedic tone, Matt actually gave this out as a gift to all of us on the podcast, right? Like 3 Christmases ago, something like that.
Yeah. Yep.
It's called The Way of the House Husband.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's really funny. It's retired Yakuza, and he's a house husband. He stays home and he takes care of the house while his wife/girlfriend, I don't remember if they're married or not, but she's the breadwinner. She goes out and works the corporate job, and he stays home, and it's his travails of learning how to use like the Roomba or the proper way to clean up the sink. And it's really wholesome and endearing and very funny. So I would recommend that. And then, like Jono, I have an anime. Of course I do. If you want to get a good inside look of what like Japanese anime industry is like, just like Honda-San shows you with the manga booksellers, I would recommend Shirabaku. It follows a group of like 5 or 6 young women as they're graduating from college and they want to get into the anime industry, and each of them are pursuing different aspects. Like if the main one wants to be a producer, but there's a voice actor, there's illustrators, 3D modeler, and I think there's a writer in there too. And it just follows their, like, it shows you how it's made, like the crazy turnaround these people have to do to pump out these animes on a weekly basis.
Time frames are nuts.
It's insane, but it goes into like, I love it. It goes into like detail on each of the aspects of it and like the interview process and what a job actually would look like. And it's really great and really funny and endearing characters. And I really highly recommend Shirabaku if you want to get anime industry insight.
Love that.
So like on the recommendations are Helter Skelter and who knows what actually will work for anyone topic. Hopefully some of these recommendations work for you out there, listeners. B, my wife Kat had bought for me like the first volume of
Is it bear related?
No, it is.
Yeah,
it's not bear related. Bakuman, which I for some reason was like thinking in my head that I was gonna say Bakugan, but no, this is right. Bakuman, which is about 2 kids who are like teenagers and they're gonna become a manga writer and artist. So like it's a manga industry deep dive, which you would think would be good and would be up my alley because I'm into all this like inside baseball comics industry stuff. And like it was a very good pick, knowing what she did about it, and also the volume she bought me was in Japanese, so neither of us could really read it. Yeah. Got the first volume of that from the library earlier this year finally to read. It's sexist as hell.
Oh, I just clicked on images and there's a large-breasted friend that
Yeah, which is like not surprising. It's from the creators of Death Note. So like I was not surprised. I was not surprised that it was sexist as hell, but I was disappointed. So again, sometimes you recommend a thing to a person and it just doesn't quite get there. So we've all had the struggle, Honda-san.
Yeah.
Well, all right, guys. I think that is all we have for this month's discussion of Skull-Face Bookseller Honda-San. As always, if you want to get in touch with Pat or myself, you can email us at waitingonthetrade@gmail.com. You can send positive comments or you can send negative criticism. We will take them both in stride and feel like we failed you if it's negative. You can also find more comics-related goodness at mattreadscomics.com. Jono, thank you so much for coming on to talk about this book with us. It was, as always, a delight. And yeah, really appreciated getting a chance to read this kind of unique book for us with the two of you guys.
I mean, honestly, I've said it before, and I will say it again. It is always an honor and a pleasure to be asked, and the books that I get recommended to read for the show are always a delight. And so, I feel like I don't just come on to have like a fun chat with friends. I also do get my tastes broadened. So, yeah, always very, very grateful.
We remain better than your average bookseller, apparently.